Welcome our dear friend, the community scientist herself, Venia Logan, as she discusses the 3 What's in it for me dashboard approach to organizing the community data Firehose. Y'all are in for a treat. I'm gonna let Venia take it from here.
Yeah, one quick moment. Let me get that screen up and ready. You're going to be doing a template. Toss you over here. Great. Oh, and it stopped my share screen. One moment. We're good. We're fine. Okay. Okay. How is everyone? Let me know in the chat. I'm one of those people who my extroversion tends to show. I'm one of those people who absolutely loves sharing immense amount of expertise in the chat, especially when it comes to data and visualization, because there are so many amazing ways that you can go about measuring online community health. And that's what we're going to be discussing, right? So oftentimes as a consultant, I don't get to spend a whole bunch of integrated long-term time in a lot of communities actually in it looking at the data. So I would love your perspective as we do go through this. Just real quick, can everyone see the maximum on the screen? It looks like it went through. Yeah, perfect.
Yes, looks good. Looks really good.
Awesome. Yay. Hey, Sarah, a few minutes, tech issues. Yeah. All right. So are we ready? Are we ready to get started, or do we have about 8 minutes?
Let's roll. Everybody's excited.
Okay, sweet, sweet, sweet. All right, so we are talking about a community data fire hose. I do want to offer, and we'll talk a little bit more about this actually going into the presentation. There are 2 assets. There are 2 resources that you're going to walk away from this talk with. The first one is going to be a very basic, just to get started with qualitative data and social scientific methodology. So I'm going to send you a spreadsheet in a little bit. And then in addition to that, we're actually going to give you the 3 What's in it for me dashboard approaches as a template. And I've been very careful about that template because I have a thing about templates. I don't want to give you a complete thing so that you go and you apply it to your community. And then you're like, hey, this data is not useful. It's not answering a useful truth. It might be the truth, but it's not really telling us anything about the community. So instead of that, I gave you a template that is representative, and I'm going to prepare you to build into that template all of the data that you need for you to have a better social scientific understanding of your community. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. A little bit of housekeeping. This presentation is actually also going to be a larger class that we're going to be doing over at Scott Wilder's CLG campus, which is incredible. And it'll also be simultaneously run on the learning community for SociallyConstructed.Online. You'll get more links toward the end of it. And let's kind of get started. Why do you want to listen to me? Why am I the person up here pervading the air about online community health? My name is Samantha Venia Logan. I do go by Venia. And I run a company called SociallyConstructed.Online, which is all about building online communities for my clients and then using those communities as sites to teach community managers the social science of community. I actually got started in my community adventures within the queer and LGBTQ spaces, where I developed a YouTube channel about my own transition. And in the course of that, I had collected upwards of 5,000 people who were all also in need of resources, development, and assistance. But this was also 2013. This was also like the burgeoning growth of retarget marketing throughout the internet, and it became dangerous to be a closeted, questioning, or stealth LGBTQ person online. So I had a question. How do I cater to the safety, anonymity, and control of that data for these queer closeted people, while also being able to prove that they exist for grants and businesses? How exactly do we measure this audience without measuring this audience. So I went to school and I'm like, how do I do this? And the university, we don't know. Communicate anthropology, maybe business. We don't know. So I just took them all. And because of that, I kind of started this development in the study of virtual worlds for anthropology and communication. But when I came out of that school, I also didn't know how the internet worked. So I spent 5 years ignoring it. And then I discovered that the retarget marketing world and Google Analytics had kind of come up and developed. So I went and I learned. I became a full stack marketer at Digital Marketer. And now I am merging these two areas, being able to market and create powerful brand communities with a strong understanding of community health. So with that said, there's 3 things that I want you to remember throughout the course of this presentation. First off, we are going to plan big. We're going to design, we're going to construct, we're going to strategize. But do me a favor. I want you to progress small. I want you to create this larger design and have a parking lot of your questions. And whenever you have those questions, I want you to take a step in your community, knowing you will be wrong, because mistakes make better plans. And with that in mind, I want you to implement each step of that plan just good enough, right? And then get community feedback to make it better. And just do that one thing at a time. We're going to be here. I know that Lori and I are always going to be accessible, especially here at CMX Denver. So come back later. We'll have discussions, we'll have talks. We're always here and happy to help. So let's talk about this big problem, right? Why are we discussing community health as it pertains to data? Why is it so hard to measure? What's not working for us in the current paradigm? And here's the current paradigm, right? This is what we're really looking for. There's a traditional marketing funnel where we have a conversation. That's really all it is in marketing, is a conversation with a user that says, hey, I'm aware of this. I'm totally going onto your website, your shop. I'm entering the door. And you're like, oh, awesome, cool. I'm glad you're here. What are you interested in? And then you ask them to raise their hand for a specific set of interests that you cater to. And when they raise their hand, you add a tag and you say, hey, it looks like you're interested in this. How would you feel about this thing? And then they're like, ooh, raise the hand again. Yes, wonderful. So you add a second tag and you deliver whatever the thing they were interested in onto the system. And then eventually, when they stop raising their hand, when they go, no, that's that point where you remove the tag and then you send them backwards in the funnel in order for them to renegotiate the situation. That's the conversation in marketing. Here's the problem. You have 3 of these funnels. And each of these funnels is made to be simple and intuitive. You have a community manager and a data flow architect who can manage all of this and keep it all working like a well-orchestrated machine. And then your community comes around and they start jumping backwards and forwards and all over the place in your funnels. What do you do with that? How do you manage something like that? And it's up to the communities to manage it, because funnels only converse with that one individual user. But each person going into your funnel, they want to talk to someone else who's not in the funnel, but has your product. They want to talk to experts, or they want to talk to people who are like them. They want to learn how this product can really, truly be used. It's peer-to-peer. And because of that, they're leaving funnel A to go to funnel B to talk to people. They discover funnel C, and then they arrive halfway through the funnel. That's too complicated. It doesn't really work. We need a better way to measure. So let's take a community model, the orbit model. Most people are pretty familiar with this. Really, all it is a older academic model called the socio-ecological model. And you'll see over here on the left that you actually have a set of funnels in groups. And in truth, you have 3 or 4 of these across the entire arc. And throughout each of these, you have different layers, people in different parts of their customer value journeys, people who are transgressing these membranes between scopes. Ambassadors are still talking to and engaging as observers. They're just in a different point in their place, right? And a community member can enter any one of these funnels at any time. funnels have only been a one-directional measure going through each of those funnels. So we need a better way. One of the big issues that we've been running into, what's the problem we're trying to solve, right? You'll note that for community managers, we're using a myriad of different tools. There's just been an explosion of tools precisely because we haven't been able to measure our communities because our communities themselves are chaotic. And the problem that's causing is automation, integration, data enrichment, GDPR compliance, sentiment analysis. None of these things are really being catered to in the current measurement paradigm. So there are two sides to this discussion. The first one is the people who have built the system, the data marketers and the community managers. And on one side, we're saying this funnel isn't enough. People don't use the internet using this dictated process that you control. But the marketers are on the other end going, well, going beyond that is too complicated. Even today, what users do in our funnels is still more reliable and more expedient to selling a product than what they say. User opinion in our communities is always viewed as less important than the behaviors. So there are going to be two sides to the solution to solving this problem. Community managers need to spend more time systematizing their community metrics so that they work in concert with the current system. And data marketers need to expand that system. We need to create better strategies to measure behavior less creepily. Now, here's where I will say this talk is a part of a series, right? So I had to go talk to the marketers and say, look, here's the problem. And I did that over at my friends at MeasureMind. You can actually get a link to that portion of the talk. And then now with us community managers, here's this part of the discussion. We'll be focusing on building community this time around. Now, I also want to say, again, this is also a part of an e-course. This entire workshop is being expanded into an e-course later. And here's what each module is for. We need to understand how metrics really abstract reality, how the behaviors and the sentiments of individuals really become metrics. And in order to understand that, I have to introduce you to a new measurement paradigm. I say new, it's not really new. It's 80 years old, but we need to understand how the social scientific process in social science augments the scientific method. And once we have that, we'll be able to establish our scopes. I'll discuss that a little bit later, build data flows, ask the right questions, and deliver relevant answers on our dashboard. So here's what the core of the problem is with metrics in community on our dashboards. There is a concept of how vague are you going to get with the details and how narrow and specific are you going to get with the data? Because you have individual comments coming in, and on a low level area, there's a lot of detail. This person said this person said this, 5 people share that same concept in common. But that's not going to be helpful for your community CEO who's responsible for managing all of it. So you have to distill or abstract your detail into a higher meaning of relevance. And this abstraction process occurs across 4 general layers, but in truth, you're going to discover that even individual metrics have 4, 5, 12, 16 different layers of data development in general. So here's how this works for a single community-based metric. This is John O'Bacon's favorite metric. It's actually a really good metric, daily over monthly active users. This is a cohort metric that asks, of the people who came in on a specific day, how many people are taking actions at any given time in a month? And then further, for each action, can we ascribe a value or a calculated metric for each behavior to give them impact points? So by doing this, you have the ability to say, person posted brand new on our forum or commented on an individual forum. That is an action we would like to reward them for. A new post is 5 points and a second post is 2 points. You have now added a second metric, a value table, onto that behavior. And then once you have this basic value set based upon tags or systems, you can now start to build formulas or mathematical proofs for what each piece of that data means. This is called a compiled metric, which is an action times a value divided by the amount of time. And that gives you overall your basic DAU, MAU metric. Y'all, that was one metric. One. And this is the metric that runs a large majority of GitHub commits. This graph, 80 contributions in the last year, is a GitHub commit. And in addition to that, you can see that GitHub has actually produced an entire culture around how many times people have committed. This single metric, by having a proper abstraction that very quickly takes actions into metric behaviors, you can now create a cohort analysis and an individual activity report for people to feel proud of. One metric, a single metric. But now let's talk about adding multiple metrics. It's enough to count a person does a thing on a website. How do you actually count the thinking actions and feelings, the reason people do stuff, the sentiment analysis? How do you measure actual human beings with this system? If so much goes into one metric, now as community managers, we're expected to collect all of that data. And this is what I mean by the Firehose. Community managers have to abstract way too much data. It takes way too many layers to do it. It's too haphazardly collected. There are way too many issues with data visualization. And then you have to store and report it over time. So it's not enough now to answer the question once. You have to do it regularly. And the whole time, you have to quantify that value. You have to tell your CEO, this is what happened. Because if you don't have that measurable value, you don't have a budget. So how do we fix it? I would like to bring you back to 6th grade, right? To the scientific method. You have this question or this observation and you go, oh, wow, that's really weird. And then you put together an environment where you're going to do this experiment and you say, if I pull lever A, result B will come out. And then it doesn't do that or it does do that. And you're like, cool, great. Next experiment because I've learned something. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work. We have to move out of the closed environment. We have to move out of the simple process, and we have to be able to look at all of the data regularly over time. We have to measure our communities social scientifically. So here's the new process. Here's the new measurement paradigm, right? This is the social scientific process. It's existed since 1960, but we haven't really applied it to our virtual worlds and our virtual spaces outside of academia. It did 4 main things to augment the standard scientific method. First, it started by benchmarking things over time. What that effectively means is we're able to look at past data as if it occurred concurrently at the moment. And by understanding that, we can basically make it one big, long experiment. But in order to do that, we also had to change the concept of a variable in the scientific method. Variables in social science are not the thing that we measure. We notice a thing has happened in the community, and then we attempt to extrapolate that out, and we say, is it happening in this other community? If you've ever been a community manager and you've been talking to a marketer and they're just like, yeah, let's run this experiment, and we sold a whole bunch of ads and our ROI is 4x, so let's expand it. So they add another group of people. And then you're like going, okay, yeah, but those people are different. And they're like, no, it's the numbers, the algorithm will handle it. So then they spend $8,000 instead of the 4 that they spent prior to expand and connect with a wider amount of people. And it works and it succeeds. And you're like, okay, well, I didn't expect that, but all right. And then they're like, okay, so it looks like we have a successful funnel now. Let's go ahead and spend $1 million. And you get a little concerned. You get a little worried. And rightly so, because then he comes back and it didn't work. It didn't happen. What occurred there? The variables never changed. Nothing in that situation actually changed. What did change was the scope the people that you're interacting in, the environment, the boundaries of the individuals who are truly interested. And it's this scope that we really want to focus on. So first, let's start with number 2, recording and abstracting data. There's this concept called codification. Let's say person A said this in your super user group, and it's a great idea. It's a good topic. It's important. So you bring it in and you're like, okay, so this is about community health. So you tag it. And then you go over to environment B. You go to your general users and you ask them via survey, we'd like to know, is this a thing? Like we had a veteran member say it's a thing. Is this actually a thing? They can either say yes or no. And then if you put it out on Twitter, that survey could be also completely different. So we have to inductively collect the differences in each of those scopes, a difference in your veteran members, a difference in your regular users, and a difference in your Twitter profile, right? You have to collect all of those and inductively combine them into a hypothesis. In order to do that, there are 5 valid methods of doing this within social science. Fortunately for you, you're not planning on launching a white paper, right? And because you're not planning on launching a white paper, all you need to worry about in order to remain valid is this formula. A concept applies to B population only so far as C limitation. And keep in mind, in any study, predictions must hold a specific scope of conditions that limit its application. This is very, very critical. You need to be able to tell the difference between your scopes, and you're measuring in social science, not the variables, but the scopes in which those variables occur. So, an example, we have a high sense of belonging among our super users, but that high sense of belonging does not occur among vendor contributors within that community. What happened? What's going on there? And by having this question, you can now dive into the data to make assumptions, to do interviews, and to build a good survey. So with that having been said, let's now dive into the scopes of community. Earlier, you saw that we were discussing with the orbit model observers, users, fans, and ambassadors. This is an example of the scopes of community, wherein you have each individual action where people are hanging out, and you'll notice you have a membrane there. From observers, they must cross a membrane to become users. That is where your funnels come into play. Each funnel step is simply them raising a hand and saying, I'm ready to go into the next scope. And then you saying, great, here's an onboarding process for you to take that next step. And then they hang out in the user's scope for a little while. Let's use a different analogy. Because we use the word membrane, we can now view our community as a cell. Every cell has a purpose. Every location is set for the nucleus. So you can have everyone else, and then they must take a step into engaged members. There are 2 elements of a membrane. The first one is transparency. Can you actually see through that enough to determine the value of it being useful for you to cross that membrane? How transparent is that group? And then there's porosity. How easy is it for you to move across that membrane? Is your onboarding funnel very, very difficult on purpose so that it is pre-qualifying the individuals to go into that space? Or is it as easy as it can possibly be in order to convince the cell to grow, to increase its specific membrane? Interestingly enough, you can also do this with your key stakeholders, the people who own the community, the people who own the business. If you want to build any of these layers, you need to set a precedent for those layers. Oftentimes that's asking your community, what is this thing that you want changed in the community to make it better? And then once you've identified a precedent, you need to build momentum circle by circle, starting with your super users and then going to your engaged members. And then after your engaged members, they will tell everyone else that that's the way that things work. So now your entire community is now boiled down into 2 things, precedent and momentum. This will be important in a little bit. So we've discussed the primary system, the new measurement paradigm, this social scientific process of measuring your online communities. Now we're going to move into the promise that I gave you, which is your dashboards, right? In order for you to understand how these process, it's important for you to understand that your data abstraction doesn't matter to different scopes of your community. So when you ask yourself, should we measure the thing? And how can we measure the thing? I want you to recognize that there is a certain amount of information that's always going to come into your community. The data is there and it's reporting true. People did do the thing, but it's not useful to specific members of your community. Going up and telling your CEO a highly detailed metric doesn't matter. Going and telling your community members the ROI of your community is probably not recommended. But as you start to massage the data, work through it, properly design it, properly organize it, make sure that there's a solid enough setup, you become more and more accurate. So you've made the data now useful enough to direct any action based upon a person's question. So they ask a question, you collect the information, you massage it and organize it, and then you deliver it to them in a way that allows them to perform an action. And at a certain point, all of that massaging is pointless because their action isn't changing by the question that they have, right? They can have 90 different questions, but if their action on the output is just the exact same thing, maybe you're a little bit metrics obsessed, right? Maybe you're spending a little bit too much time crunching numbers instead of making choices. The easiest way to do this is to stop reporting based upon preferred metrics. I love being up here on a stage. Jono loves being up here on a stage. Carrie Melissa Jones, David Spinks. We love telling you about the KPIs and the ways to measure online community. But the reality is we don't understand your scope. What we are providing you is a toolbox, and that toolbox can be used to mix and match and connect and deliver data based upon individual scopes. So what we need from you for us to give you your KPIs is for you to go through the rule of generalization, for you to look at your communities, identify your questions, build them into your scopes, find your precedent, and then we can help you measure your momentum. So don't just go with preferred KPIs. Now, here's how we're going to do this. We're bringing it back to ground, right? Because your stakeholders and your community members are different scopes, they care about different things. Your C-suite cares about the results and how. They care about a much greater scope. They want to know 1,000 feet up, how's the community doing? What is the health of the individual cell? Then as you come down, there's the community team, the key stakeholders who are responsible for building the community. You need to know what precedents does this community need me to set in order for it to be healthy? And how can I build momentum for those precedents to be successful? So by doing so, you can interact and create small group interactions with your departments. And then your departments can connect to your community. And community culture, therefore, because you've gotten rid of those ROI and value metrics, and because you've sequestered your precedent and momentum actions, you can now begin to separate the community health, the culture of your online community from the results, how, precedent, and momentum. Those things can be different. And what this yields us, in case you haven't noticed, is a process, a social scientific process of collecting your information, standardizing it, analyzing it, compiling it for CEOs, and then reporting and predicting future behavior in your online community. And it's produced 3 specific dashboards. See, there it is. I made my promise. You need to have a dashboard for an executive summary, a dashboard for cross-departmental objectives, and finally, a dashboard that is just about your community pulse. I've provided here for you basically one department metric for each touch point in the community. Those department metrics are the department's responsibility. They need to report to the community team how the community has impacted their operations. Likewise, when it comes to your cross-departmental objectives, you need to be able to say, with a certain air of finality, how easily you set precedent and built momentum. So what really, really matters there is your interaction with support operating well? Is your ability to edit the website that they're interacting going well? What about specific problems in the forum that prevent you from understanding how the community is using it? And once you've done that, you can now discuss, okay, what is the community doing? How are they onboarding? How are they growing? What quality of interactions are they having? Are they attending your events? All these super basic metrics that tend to float all over the place in your mind, they now have a place. Precedents, activities, goals, attitudes, values, and artifacts. Just measure them separately. Here it is. You can take a screenshot. I also have the setups later, but I also want to remind you that this is going to be a full course on the CLG campus and at SociallyConstructed.Online as well. With that, I have a few things that I want to remind you. First off, content is king. The metrics and the data is king. That's what your action is going to be managing. But you can't actually govern the king without the context, the queen. There's a royal family here. If you're going to deliver a metric, you must, and you'll remember this from Amanda's talk, you must talk about the context in which those actions are occurring. It's hugely plausible that you can build a dashboard that means the world to you, but doesn't mean anything to someone else. And as a result, that context is critical for you to build into the dashboard just as much as your metrics are. Another thing I want you to keep in mind, because of the context, there are specific metrics that, even though they're important, because they will change the action that is taken as a result of seeing them, they do not belong on the dashboard. If the action becomes convoluted, or there are 3 or 4 actions they could take based on the data, then you might want to massage it a little bit more, find a little bit more accuracy. And lastly, I'm going to give you some resources, some information in the chat here in a little bit. And I want you to recognize that there's a ton of systems out there. We are in the rise of the community intelligence platform. We have Threado, Communify, Talkbase, Common Room, Orbit, all over the place. Bitergia Analytics is doing an amazing job. What you are looking to do with these systems is simply systematize, like we needed to, the social scientific process. It's about behaviors and sentiment, and it's about quality and quantity. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, no worries. You have to start somewhere. Measuring is a muscle. No one's a numbers person. Just focus on the truth that you find in a trend and look at the power that you have in understanding the pattern. Know what you're asking for and why you need to know, and always revert any question that you get from your business to what action are you going to take if this question turns out to be this information versus this information. Follow that QAI process. Are we ready? How much more time do we have?
We have about 20 minutes or so.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Are we ready to design it? Let me know in the chat. Do you want to design it now?
I do.
Cool. All right. So, yeah, see, we got a few thumbs up. Thank you, Lara. So what we're going to do now is we're going to build 3 dashboards based upon the results and how, the precedent and the momentum, and then the sentiment and the behavior. And the way that we're going to do this is with these 2 short links. I'm going to toss them into the chat. So sems.me/sems-datasheet. So what this is basically an Excel data sheet. And remember, measurement's a muscle. This is the very, very beginning. Some of you may be well beyond this data sheet. Others, this might confuse you. But we're going to go through them together to show you how we're going to build these dashboards. And then the second link there is going to be the dashboards that you can copy. They are built in Looker Studio. I can also build some in Tableau, and I can build some in Power BI. If there's express interest, just email me to let me know if that's what you would like to do. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and open up both of those. I'm going to stop sharing just briefly as I transfer. Okay, not working for you. All right, let me Brandly log in. Oh, I see. I know exactly what the problem was. This one should work if my computer will let me. What's going on there? Copy. Oh, is it working for you, Julia? For some reason I cannot seem. There we go.
It's the dashboards was misspelled. That's all. Instead of
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, no big deal.
Yeah, my fault. Split attention. I don't normally do well with it. Okay. All right. So we have two resources here. Let me pull these out. There we go. Okay, so we have two resources. So your first one is a data sheet. It's a spreadsheet. And what this is basically a private spreadsheet for you to go through that social scientific process, right? So first we need to start collecting some data, just get down on the ground, be an anthropologist in your own community. And then once we've built that, you're going to have a community manager's field journal. This is one of the most rudimentary, most basic tools in academics for being able to collect qualitative data. And through this, what you're going to do is you're going to tag or categorize what you've discovered in your online community. And then once you've done that, you're going to say, okay, so I think I have this hypothesis, right? Does this actually apply to my GitHub members? Does this apply specifically to my Twitter participants or my Slack group or my email? And then you're going to catalog them exactly the way you did with yours. So we've now built a system of metrics and data. Once we've built the basic rudimentary aspects of this database in, we can now pull it into a dashboard. So you'll see here is my dashboard, and it looks like it's scrolling on that setup. So let me correct that. So what you can see here is, if we can let my edit bar go away, you'll see that we have an instruction for one, how to use Google Data Studio. So this is, if this is your first time using a BI tool, here it is. This is where you get started. And you'll see here for structure and use of the dashboard that we have a split setup of executive summary, community team, and pulse check. Once you've done that, you'll see that under my executive summary section, I have provided some of the information. Keep in mind, I did not build this out for you. Some of these cards will be charts. Some of these cards will be text or systems. Some of these cards you'll completely delete because it's not relevant to you in any way. What I'm providing you is a toolbox. So what you can see, I'm following my own advice, is that you have content and then context. Each one of these includes an informational bar that you can change and manage on your own. So this is determining community generated leads. So these are all department touch points. How is community impacting support? How is community impacting marketing? How many new accounts or activations have occurred? And then in the second row, we have community contributions to those metrics. Lastly, we have a final combination. So results, how did those results happen? Once you've collected and built all of these systems, now you can answer your community ROI question, and it almost writes itself. You're like, this many support costs have been saved. This many community generated leads have been activated. This is the lifetime value of my community endeavor for the business. Here's the net revenue as a result of community. And by understanding how each of these things interacts, you can now say, stakeholders, people within my company, are now reporting to the CEO the results of our interactions and how it happened. Now you can also say, here's what's happening with the community. So we add a little bit of that community infrastructure into here, and we say, here's the actions that they've taken. They viewed this many support tickets across this many sections. They were present on those pages for more than 5 minutes. They filed that report as saying it was helpful and solved their problem. This many people signed in to the community afterward, and this is how many people registered for X product. And by having this determined and using your bar up here, your setup, you can now determine based upon the source. So if you want to know Facebook, Slack, Discord, private communities, you can do that here. You can also do it with audiences. The community manager, like I said, there are two halves to this problem. The community manager needs to be in concert and in cahoots with marketing. And you'll actually hear in Pat's talk a little bit later exactly how this can be done, because Google Analytics 4 is ridiculously powerful for community and marketing interaction now because of a way easier marketing analytics, community generated lead, and audience impact. So don't just build this out by yourself, right? You may not be the expert in community management, but you can certainly say, this is what I want, and throw it to your data flow team, throw it to your marketing team, or hire a consultant to build it for you. Then once we're done with that, this is going to go a lot faster. Remember, precedent and momentum. This is just for the community team, right? This is the community team's dashboard. Does not need to be high and mighty. Tell us what's your goal. What do you expect? What objectives do you want to achieve for each precedent? And then give us 4 KPIs, just simple KPIs for how you're going to manage it. Now, crucially, these are dashboards, not reports. You can build reports into your dashboards to give you a more in-depth, more ingrained view of what's happening in your community. And then remember, in this database setup, we asked you to start by just taking a daily field journal, tagging it, asking yourself what your hypotheses are. Your hypotheses are the precedents that you want to set. So when you actually ask, what's the team saying? We've pulled in all of your interactions into the dashboard itself, and you can now see them reporting on the set. You can also remove a highlights button. So all this does is you'll see that we have a Boolean checkbox for, do you want to highlight this comment? If you're a member of a team, the community coordinator just comes in and goes, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about that in the meeting. So you can check it off, and then only the ones you want to talk about will show up here. That would be my meds. You have a lot of noise happening. I'm sorry. And then just like your field journal works in your sentiment tracker, you can now also view exactly that, but for your community. The website is legitimately good. It's making it extremely easy to schedule. So this is all great, right? Like this is a highly detailed understanding of what's happening, but your categories also matter. So you can actually say on GitHub, where our scope is concerned, a notoriety point was awarded. So now you have the ability to ask yourself, based upon your catalog and categorization, what happened here? And here's the thing about pie charts. A lot of people say pie charts are useless. Click on this, and then it will change your data to represent just the qualitative data that includes that information. So handy, so helpful. Use your pie charts as a table of contents to help people navigate and understand the data they're looking at better. That's what they're for. You can also see that we have a net promoter score option here. It is a bit misleading, but it is also a good place to start. Once you're done with that, now that we've done those two, you've freed yourself up for behaviors and sentiment. And you'll see here, this is a proprietary system that I've built called the social currency metric system, wherein we're counting based upon sentiment data, the transparency, utility, consistency, merit, and trust factors of the interactions. And then you can also see how many did you acquire? How did the community grow? What are the top 5 kudos in your community this week? And what are the top 5 uh-ohs that need to be handled right now? All of this data, this entire dashboard, comes from this spreadsheet and from Google Analytics, and that's it. So all you need to do now is come over here and set up your terms. You need to identify your community scopes. I put in a few infrastructures, so you'll see some from Orbit, some from Digital Marketer, some from Common Room. You need to decide what are your community scopes, fill them in, then ask what stages of the marketing team's funnel do each of these scopes correlate with? And what it's doing is it's now going to give you a far more appropriate version of, if I can find it, this graph. You've now, in a simple spreadsheet, done this, built this out, constructed this, and started this process, all with a simple spreadsheet that powers a 3-perspective dashboard. And that's it.
That is amazing and beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody, now since we have a little bit of time left, does anybody have any questions for Venia?
I'll stop sharing. I hope it was good. I hope it wasn't too, I don't know. I have a tendency to be very academic. It's just my brand. There's no stopping it.
Shouldn't be stopped. It's wonderful. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Venia or any comments? Or I shared Venia's website. It's SociallyConstructed.Online, and her email is Venia, and it's spelled Venia at SociallyConstructed.Online. There you can find a lot of really amazing information about her processes, her consulting business. You can see her upcoming speaking engagements, and you can learn lots more about her. Hi, Tirza.
Hello. So we have an in-person question.
Yay!
Woot.
Hi, thank you so much for an amazing presentation. I wanted to follow up a little bit more about that connection between metrics within the community and about the community, and how that can work with those in the marketing department and their needs and their goals, so that your work can be aligned and not in two separate silos. If you could speak a little bit more about that.
Oh. Truth be told, I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret. I have several talks throughout the next year who are going to be tackling exactly that. Because I could do an entire webinar on answering that question, right? But here's the short one, right? Marketing has these problems with their funnels. They can't measure community, and they organize their funnels as best as possible, but their funnels constantly break. They just don't have a complete truth. And because we're seeing remarketing practices break down because of GDPR, privatization, the loss of third-party cookies, we have this parallel movement happening. So in community, we have community managers who have been going to siloed departments over and over and over again. And we can't keep doing that. So community is becoming a super department. And on the other side, this is happening to marketers too. Measurement has constantly been a department report. We need to defend our ROI in marketing. We need to defend our ROI in sales. Marketing and sales get into a fight. But what they did was they just combined their reports. And in so doing, measurement has now become, stop me if this is familiar, a super department. So because we now have a super department of metrics and a super department of community, you can now say, I want one representative from each department to be a member of the community team. You're responsible for that singular KPI for the executive dashboard. And also, we are going to put the data and analytics team above us. So the data flow architect and the measurement marketer are getting their information from the community team. The community team is composed of one member of each department from the stakeholders. And you can now report a single dashboard of 5 different reports, one for each department, to determine results and how. I do have a slide I can share to kind of make that easier, but does that answer your question?
Yes, it does help. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Wow, that was actually really easy. I found it very simply. So the presentation kind of starts with the attribution problem, because this is what's happening. Every department needs this. And then because of that attribution problem, we have to go from this, where everyone is measuring and reporting their own outcomes, to this. You create business structures that align with the data coming in, and you abstract the data in your processes just as much as you do your data flow.
Do we have any other questions in here? No in-person questions, it looks like.
Okay.
And I don't see any in the chat.
I do. Can you share the link to the course you were mentioning earlier? So I think it's the
Yes.
CLG one. I was going to do that too, but go ahead.
Yeah, so the CLG course is going to replace this page, which was the workshop that we did in February. But it's also going to be readily available on my website as well. So learn. So if we pop into the course dashboard, you'll see we have a grayed out version right here, 3 WiiFM dashboards. The official launch date for this course is going to be April 5th. So feel free to join the community Discord or like follow me in any way. And I'm pretty sure you'll get an absolute water hose of announcements for its launch.
Yeah, the CLG courses are really, really amazing. I highly recommend folks joining them. And of course, join Venia's. Does anybody else have any questions? Last call for questions. Okay.
Somebody asked to share the first slide on your deck again.
Oh yeah, you know what? I'm gonna do you one better. Show the first slide of what?
Of I think you're probably your original deck.
Okay.
And then maybe they need to, if they could screenshot it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No. Share. Post. There's your slides. So this is the first slide, yeah? Are you looking for contact information?
Maybe.
I think the whole Venia graciously just shared the entire deck with us.
Yeah, if you are comfortable sharing the slide deck, we can send it out to registrants.
Yeah, I actually just posted it in the comments.
Okay, perfect.
Just mentioned. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. If everybody is good, then I want to thank you all for attending. And I posted the link to join the Denver chapter, and you can join any other chapter. And big thanks from us to Venia for this beautiful talk. And we hope to see you guys again in the future, and take good care. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.